Hi, this is Donovan, and today we're talking to Susan Hamilton Green about family law and her work dealing with or working with family and in family court. Hope you enjoy it.
Behaviour.
That's
Why is
correct.
this parent having this struggle? But not only what's happening with the parent and the child, because it's very easy for a parent to blame it on the other parent. I hear consistently things like, I don't have that problem at all. The children don't play up when they're with me, so it
Yes.
must be the problem with the other parent. Or I don't see that sort of behaviour. Or when they come back to me, it takes them 2 or 3 days to settle down to be the child that they are. And therefore, the problems I'm experiencing are a result of the time that they're spending, the quality of the time, the quality of the parenting that they're getting from the other parent. And they never, ever stand back to think, maybe it's the difficulty for this child in moving from an experience in one household and then having such an incredibly different experience in the other household. There's no common understanding about what are the values that we think are important for our children. How do we feel we should be managing their behaviour? What should be the consequences of their behaviour so that it's consistent in both households, so these children get to understand
Yes.
how to manage.
Yes.
So what you have is not a child learning life skills that are going to take them forward. All
Yep.
that child learns is, how do I cope when I'm in dad's household? And how do I
Yes.
cope when I'm in mum's household? And so we're not giving our children, all these parents aren't giving their children the life skills that they need to manage, not only in their household, in the family, but also outside of the family. So they do have struggles at school. They
That's
do
right.
have struggles in relationships with their peers, and it's always seen as their problem. And then we want to label it. We want to label it ADHD. Oh, they've got to be on the spectrum. Oh,
Yes.
there's got to be some reason. No
Yes.
one. I mean, I don't know of a service, really. I mean, family therapy is one, but finding good family therapy is virtually impossible at an affordable rate in a
Yes.
timely way to meet the needs of families at a particular time. I mean, I know family therapy is the best way, but if both parents are blaming the other, I don't know that they're ready for family therapy.
That's correct. That's very correct. Because it's hard to bring family into family therapy, because normally what we would do in family therapy is we'd work with one parent today, the other parent the next day, and then work with a child. And then when we feel that it's safe for both parents, whether they're in a relationship or separated or divorced, then we can bring all of them, mom, dad, and children, so that they can work together to find out what's the best way to parent a child. Because like what you were saying, we tend to label our children and say, oh, this child is on spectrum or ADHD. But hang on a sec. This child is reacting, like you said, to the environment that they're being presented with, the environment of the mom, the environment of the dad, and then they have to also cope with their own emotion. And then we label them as having a traumatic or mental health. Hang on a sec. These labels doesn't help any of the children. It's great that we know what's happening, that there are labels, but how do we help our children by not just labeling them and pigeonholing them?
Yeah, the problem I've got is we put a child in a box with a label and they're stuck in that box.
That's true.
They're never able to get out of that box. When I was a child, everybody had their own particular characteristics or idiosyncrasies, and they were celebrated for what made them different.
That's so true.
Nowadays, if you've got any differences, they want to put a label, and it then makes you stand apart, and that's seen as a negative. And it's a very unfortunate attitude.
Yes. And I think, and that's the reason why when I saw your post, I said, oh my God, we are finally talking about this, because, and I would recommend this book. It's by Bessel van der Kolk.
I've got that book, yeah.
Yeah, it's an amazing book. And I tell my parents that I talk to them now, and I said, have a read of the book. It's very heavy, but it tells you that you can't just put the blame on the child, and you can't just label the child. You also need to look at what's going on for you. Because if you have an unresolved mental health or trauma yourself,
Yeah.
it might be difficult for you to parent your own child because you're still dealing with your own, which is not a blame, but maybe help you understand that you need to deal with your trauma, your mental health, so that that will have a cascading effect on your children, so that you can then bring your child into a family therapy and say, look, I've been working on myself and these are the reasons. So then there's a communication rather than, nah, that's the child's problem, let's get the child diagnosed. Nah, that's my ex-partner's problem. My ex-partner's a troublemaker.
You know, an issue that's cropped up increasingly in my work just recently is the phenomenon of children not being able to sleep.
Okay, tell me more about this.
Parents who are complaining that, you know, their children have a sleep issue, and I didn't realize how prevalent it was. And, you know, and parents talking about giving their children melatonin, you know, to help them sleep. And I'm thinking, well, that's a typical example of what we're talking about. There's so much more to teaching a child how to deal with that pent-up anxiety in themselves, to relax, to, you know, and to get a routine, a consistent routine, so that they can get a sleep pattern going. But parents are, you know, once again, they want to get what's a quick fix for this.
That's true.
And I mean, they might have been struggling with the sleep issues for a long time. And I mean, those sleep issues can often go back to when children are babies and the parents don't manage, you know, maybe they're not available for their child. Maybe their child has an insecure attachment with them, or maybe there's some sort of crisis then. And then they carry that forward. I mean, parents can struggle with these issues for a long, long time, but they still don't seem to go to the root cause. I'm sure children aren't born being unable to, I mean, I know as babies we've got to teach them to, you know, all those basics we have to encourage and get them to understand what's happening and be able to regulate and cope with their own behaviour. But I mean, I'm sure that wouldn't be something that someone would be born with, an inability to sleep and have to cope with that for the rest of their lives. And yet I'm getting this more and more often. Now, I'm just looking at the time. I have something else. So I have an intake session starting at 9. So
that's fine.
Time constraint.
So, but you brought up a very good point, though, because even as adults, when we think about why can't we sleep? We can't sleep because we're anxious. We're thinking of something. And that's why we get insomnia. And so for these children, if they're not sleeping, they must be anxious about something. Let's talk about that anxiety. But let's not label the child as being having anxiety. The child is just anxious. What is that anxiousness? Where is that coming from? I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but I did a presentation at the Australian Association of Family Therapy. And one of the things that I talked about is that children sometimes don't know how to express what's going on in their body or in their brain. So a lot of the times we hear children saying, I'm bored. And when I started working with children and talking to them and researching this, sometimes the word boredom for them is not actually boredom itself. It's just a way for them to express. Now, for children who might not be sleeping, let's not just call them as having anxiety problem, you know, but rather let's talk about what's going on for that child. If there is separation going on in the home, if there's domestic violence, if there's drug and alcohol problem, this might be contributing factors to why they're not sleeping, because they're hyper, you know, they're hyper vigilant. That's why they can't sleep. So what are the things that have you heard, Susan, about these children who are not sleeping?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, I only deal obviously with a very narrow band of the population. So when I make these comments, I'm not saying that they're necessarily relevant for the whole parenting population, but of the parents I see and the complaints I hear, it's obviously in because I'm involved, it's in a setting where there's disagreement. There might be conflict. There might even be some serious issues of control and coercion. And you often get a situation where there's such an imbalance of power that the children are the one thing in the middle that maybe the mother, maybe her identity is tied up with her role as a mother, and then we've got the father saying, well, we've separated now, I'm an equal parent, I want to have the children. So you've got so many issues for the parents tied up around the children, and it's in that context. And I mean, if I think of when I can't sleep and I have trouble sleeping, it's usually because I've got a problem.
That's right.
That I'm really, wanting to sort out and I might be struggling with. Or it might be that I'm just hyped up, I've had a really busy day, and up until the time that, I've laid my head on the pillow, I just haven't had the time to settle down and regulate. Or it might be that I'm going through a phase where I'm not doing as much meditation and relaxation as I should. So I'm not allowing my body to really let go. I mean, they're the reasons why I might struggle. Or maybe I don't drink coffee or alcohol, but maybe I've had something, I've eaten something or done something, late in the evening that means that my body's, not ready to let go. So, there might be a whole lot of reasons, but I suspect that there's sort of the same things for children as well. And I'm not sure why parents think they put a child in a bed, maybe they read a story and just say, well, go to sleep now, and think that kids are just going to do it. I mean, children see their parents as role models and they look to their parents for guidance. And so once again, we assume our children have the skills to be able to go to sleep. But we as parents, I think, have a responsibility to help them. If they're struggling, well, what's going on,
Yes.
I mean, the situations that I see as an independent children's lawyer, there's often, there's always family violence, mental health issues, or substance abuse. So you've got a background of all of that. And parents are so naive and they think that the children aren't aware of all of that. And my experience is that when parents are in that state, in that world, children are often hyper-vigilant and hyper-sensitive to where their parents are at. And they almost take on board a lot of the anxiety that their parents are feeling, without understanding why or where it comes from or the purpose of it or what the cause of it. They just take it on because they want to, and they're pleasers. Children want to be loved and loved, so they'll do whatever they can to support that parent. If they think that parent needs them to sort of align with them and sort of feed the parent's anxiety, the kids will do that indirectly because they want to do what they think that parent wants of them at that time. So they then get caught up in that anxiety without even really understanding why or what the cause of it is. And that's where that article was very interesting. Because what it says is that if parents, and it's almost like intergenerational anxiety or trauma, because you think, well, what the parents have experienced, whether it's in their childhood or whether it's something they've inherited from their own parents,
they're passing it on.
Exactly, they're passing it on to the next generation. And so often it's interesting, you get a child who's diagnosed as, being on the spectrum, having difficulties communication, difficulties socialising, connecting with other peers, and maybe difficulties with authority figures or something. And then you look at the parent and you can see exactly where that's come from.
Yes.
You look at them and you look at their style of communication, you look at their background, and their connections, their connectedness with their family and their community, and you can see it almost being replicated. And yet as parents don't seem to be able to stand back and have that level of objectivity and see what's going on. So they unwittingly, I don't think parents do this deliberately, but they unwittingly then pass it on to their children. And then when they see it happening in their children, I mean, there's always the exception. You see some parents who say, look, I can see my kid going through exactly what I went through. I don't want that. So they're the ones that are going to go to someone like you and say, please, give me the skills I need to encourage my child to have a different relationship.
Yes.
But I just think it's very sad that the tendency for a lot of professionals is to think there's a problem with this child, let's label the problem, then we'll know what to do and everybody will live happily ever after.
That's correct. And that's the issue that we are seeing in the practice, is that the labeling of the children, it doesn't help any of the children. And it's interesting you should say that, because I think one of the biggest issue I can think of is the divide between the different system. You have the court system, and you've got the education system, and also you've got the psychological system, and then you've got the all the different systems that are working together, but they don't talk to each other. So the issue now becomes, well, if no one is talking to each other, how do we know how to look at this problem? Because sometimes professionals like us ourselves, who might be teaching in university, we teach to the curriculum, but what you're saying is something that needs to be talked about at the university level, so that the education system, the teacher, the lecturers, and the researchers can change their research, because it appears that a lot of research is basically based on regurgitated literature. But the information you're providing is actually very useful, and something that the education system needs to hear, because you're coming from evidence base.
Yes, but as I said before, I don't think it's terribly easy to hear, because I do deal with quite a narrow band of the population. It's very easy for people to say, oh yes, but I'm not part of that group. But I hear what you're saying. If you don't start the conversation, it's not going to continue and grow and expand.
That's right. And I think that's why when I saw you post that, it's like, oh, this is great. People are talking about this, because, it appears that a lot of this conversation are talked about by certain people, like Bessel van der Kolk talked about it, and Judith Herman talked about it in the 1990s with her work on complex PTSD. And as you probably know, complex PTSD has still not a diagnosis in the DSM, still to this day has not been accepted, although the ICD have accepted complex PTSD in the medical setting, but not in the psychological. And I think some of our parents might be having this complex PTSD. That's why they are not able to parent their own children in a way that they should be.
Well, complex PTSD is a big issue in my world, because if you look at a very broad definition of family violence, most victims of family violence who enter my world are suffering from complex PTSD. And often they get wrong diagnosis along the way, whether it's bipolar or whether it's whatever. And they're often medicated for the wrong thing, where in fact it is complex PTSD. And if it's not recognised, then it's not really addressed the right way. And it does create, as you say, if a parent has complex PTSD, they're so easily triggered that there's going to be a pretty significant part of their time that they're not going to be available for their children. And if they don't understand what's happening to them and recognise the triggers, they're not going to be able to make other arrangements so that their children can get consistent quality parenting.
That's correct. That's exactly right. And that's why I think your work is important, because this conversation is going to hopefully start more conversation and remove that stigma around, that there's nothing wrong about looking at the parents' parenting style. Because often when I speak to other professionals about this, one of the things they often say is that, oh, you're blaming parents. I said, no, I'm not blaming parents. I actually want the parents to recognize what's going on for them. Because by them just sending the children to be diagnosed, that's actually blaming the child. But if you work together and understand that you might have some unresolved mental health or trauma issue yourself, then you can then transfer that knowledge and say, and have a conversation with your child and say, I too am going through the same process, so let's work together, not just, no, you need to be diagnosed, there's nothing wrong with me.
Sure. Well, I'm happy to pursue this conversation in my world. I don't know if you're interested in joining with me in one of my conversation series, and we can talk about this as a topic. I usually do that live on through my Facebook page. I mean, I'm happy to do it obviously at a time to suit you. So I don't know if you want to have a look at your calendar. I usually do it on a Wednesday. I don't know what at say 9 o'clock
in the morning.
I used to do it earlier, but everybody seems to be doing everything later now.
Look, Wednesday sounds good to me because I'm normally busy on Mondays and Fridays.
Yeah.
So Tuesday, Wednesdays, and Thursday, it's lighter for me, except when I have to do, private work. But otherwise, Wednesday is fine by me.
So what about Wednesday, the 23rd of September?
Sounds awesome. I'll put it in. I'll write it down now.
I'll give you a draft flyer. Donovan, do you want to send me a description of what you're doing at the moment, just so that I can describe you on the flyer? And I'll just make a list. I usually give a list of the sort of questions that we might be doing. So I'll talk about some of the questions that we've raised today.
Yeah.
But I'll get that flyer up and running today. I'll send it to you, and certainly that'll start the conversation in my space.
Yeah. Excellent. That sounds good. So I've got your email address as info@cl.
That's my work email. I'll give you my personal one. It's Susan, Susan, B for Bob, H for Harry, G for Green.
SUAN. SUSAN. Yeah.
B for Bob, H for Harry, G for Green.
Yeah.
At gmail.com.
At female?
Gmail.
Gmail, sir.
Gmail.com.
Okay. So that's Susan BG. Yeah.
BHG.
BHG. Yeah.
And my, I don't know if you've got my personal, my office number is 0419 104 494. So if you can't get through to me, you'll always get through to my practice manager, Tom, and he can answer any questions about when I might be available. But I'll give you my direct one as well. It's 0428.
0428, yeah.
695.
695, yeah.
961. Now, I would down the track also I've been, The Body Keeps the Score, that book. I'd also like to have a conversation down the track about what that book's got to offer as a resource. And I don't know, I mean, it doesn't, so you and I, and even if we get someone else, perhaps, I don't know, if you've got someone that you've, a parent or someone who you've offered that as a resource and they've found it really useful. I mean, I think it could be useful to have someone else just giving a different, if you want to think about who might be, who might be possible. I mean, everybody in my world's going to, I just think having a three different viewpoints as to what that book represents, me from my space, you from yours in the social science space. And then if we could find a parent or someone who's used the book and found it's really been very enlightening and really helped them, that would be a really interesting triangle to have a good discussion about that.
Okay. I'll contact my clients, see if they're willing to come on board.
if we did it maybe, another month down the track.
Yeah, sounds good.
We did it in late October.
Sounds amazing. Sounds good to me.
And even if you've got someone, I mean, I'm happy to even have more people. But I think to get the best out of that book, because it means something different, I think, to everybody who looks at it. Different people are going to get different things out of it, and such a powerful book. I can talk about what it says for me in my space. You can talk about but so if we had different people, it would be, I think that would be a really useful exercise. I'll give some thought to it as well. Yeah.
I might ask one of my colleagues. She's a psychologist, but she's also a parent.
Well, that'd be brilliant. Yeah, that'd be absolutely fantastic. So I mean, do you want to look at a date that you can suggest to her?
Yeah, so October, let me just... October...
You know, so maybe if we did it on...
Because you said Wednesday's the best time for you, wasn't it?
Yeah, so maybe if we did it either the 21st or the 28th of October.
Yeah, I think I'll suggest that.
That gives everybody enough time to think about it and ponder on you know, what they might have to say. And I'll go back and I'll reread it. It's a while since I looked at it. Yeah. I've been meaning to do this for a long time because it's interesting that you brought that book to my attention because I think it is such a fantastic book.
It is. Actually, one of my students got me into reading this book.
All right.
Yeah, because like I said to you, I teach the university, and one of my students came up to me and said, "What do you think of this book?" I said, "Oh, I haven't read it." And she opened up to me about her own trauma, and I said, "Look, let me have a read, and then I'll get back to you." And you know, I read it and I said, actually, it's quite a powerful book. I said, but don't take it to heart, because especially if you're not working with somebody. So make sure you read this. And if you're taking this to heart, you're speaking to a psychologist, a family therapist, or somebody, don't go on a journey on your own, because it can, if you just take it to heart, everything that he said here, you might actually do yourself a disservice. But if you're working with somebody,
well, that's a very important message to get out. Very important message.
Yes.
All right. Well, I'll get back to you about the flyer for that once we've got need names and things. But let's get the one in October. So what did we set the 23rd of September for this one?
That's right.
All right. So I'll get that flyer out today.
Okay.